Chapter 12, The Silver Lining. Okay, a quick status report. At the end of January, 1, my family was plunging into poverty. 2, my brother had no immune system. 3, my mom had no job. 4, my dad was working about 90 hours a week and appeared to be on the verge of flipping out completely. 5, the hottest girl in the 8th grade came to my house to tutor me, and I booted her off my property. 6, I was definitely going to fail my math final. But on the brighter side, my strange tragedy induced popularity at school was growing. Word got out that Stephen Albert was the guy who kicked Renee Albert to the curb, and people just described me, just decided I must be the man. And that was especially thrilled with this whole story for some reason. Maybe she figured she'd have no competition for Tutor of the Year now. Of course, every male I knew thought that sending Renee home made me an idiot, boy of the East Village Middle School. But they still felt an odd sort of admiration for me. It was like I had resisted the spell of a fearsome enchantress. Everybody else was under the spell and couldn't resist it. So they assumed I had some secret strength. It didn't matter that they were wrong, that every time Renee walked into her room and glared at me, I was torn between two equally powerful urges: to run up to her, drop to one knee, and propose, or to run away from her and cry in the boys' bathroom for an hour. All they saw was a guy who sent the cheer queen packing. Weird. Annette met me after school a bunch more times that last week. My brother and mom went to Philly and returned. I played drums and did homework. Meals got nuked and consumed. The sun rose in the east and set in the west. Numbness was setting in, but I had just enough oomph to get me through finals. I wound up with A's and B's in English and science, social studies in Spanish, a big fat D in math. Miss Daly called me into her office one Friday to break the news. Candy heart, Stephen? Last time I'd been there, I practically had to donate blood to get a candy. Now she was leading off by offering me one. The right that right there was enough to tell me that she hadn't sent for me so she could award me an honor roll t-shirt. What did I do wrong, Miss Gailey? I made every scrap of work in every class. I got a tutor. I studied like a monk. You got a 37 on your math final. Huh? How about that? I thought I'd get at least a 39 with that extra credit problem about the two trains. Stephen, I'm truly sorry. You made an incredible effort right up to the end. Yeah, so did the dodo bird and the passenger pigeon. Vanilla ice. How are your parents going to take this news? I know you were quite concerned about their reaction when you had all that homework to make up. I don't really, I don't know really. I haven't gotten lower than a B plus before, but on the other hand, they're pretty caught up in my brother's situation right now. Maybe they just kind of won't notice. I'm sorry to break it to you, Stephen, but I have a feeling they're going to notice this. I know. How are they going to find out? A report card getting mailed out home today, or will your first call and I'll have a chance, or will I have a chance to tell them? Your report card is probably already in your mailbox. Do you want me to call them before they see it? Yes, please. You can get my mom on her cell phone. She's always at the house. She's at the hospital with Jeffrey today, but she always has it on her. Try to please tell her I tried, please. She said she would certainly advocate for me. And then asked whether I wanted to be in the office for the call. I really and truly did not want to sit there and watch the live action as my mom got disappointed in me. So I went back to class. I buried my head and got through the rest of the day. But the bus ride home felt like a condemned man's last walk. Of course, when I got home, nobody was there. The answering machine had two messages. Dad would be home by 10 p.m., and I should eat without him. Well, duh. And Mom and Jeffrey would be staying at the hospital another night, but I should call Mom's cell ASAP. Now, there was an interesting dilemma. Should I call and face the problem, or not call and enjoy a few hours of lonely, nerve-wracking boredom instead of my usual lonely, depressing boredom? I pondered that for about 7/10 of a second before finally going downstairs to play drums until dinner. While I was in the basement playing, it occurred to me that my mom might worry when she didn't hear back, but I just wasn't in the mood to consider somebody else's feeling at the moment. Unfortunately, it didn't occur to me that my mom might completely spaz and send my dad home to check on me. Imagine my surprise when the basement lights went out. I stopped playing, took off my headphones, and jumped up. The lights went back on. When my eyes readjusted, I was looking straight into the vengeful glare of an enraged accountant. Stephen, it's 6:30. What are you doing? Playing drums. Why didn't you call your mother when you got home? Why should I have? She's just going to yell at me for my math grade, right? You should have called her because when you didn't, she was afraid you disappeared or something. She had me paged out of an important meeting and I came charging home. This cost us $200 and we don't have $200. That was irresponsible, Stephen. Oh, irresponsible. That's like the dirtiest word an accountant can possibly say to his kid. I knew things were at a crucial point right now. What I said next would likely determine whether I'd be grounded until marriage or just lectured for a while and then ignored again. But every once in a while, you don't make the safest choice when you're 13. Irresponsible? Irresponsible, Dad? You don't really want to talk about irresponsible. I don't think you do. Who's that super responsible guy who hasn't actually talked to his firstborn son about anything in about 4 months? Who's a pillar of responsibility who has left a 13-year-old to fend for himself for weeks on end? What's the last When's the last time you asked me about school, responsible man? When's the last time you went shopping for any food that can't be cooked using 2 minutes of radiation? Stephen, that's not fair. Fair? You banished me to the old folks' home for a week, and you want to talk to me about fair? Stephen, you know we had to take care of your brother. Now, I was in full on attack formation. It was like I was playing some kind of Dad Devastator 3 video game or something. I just couldn't stop saying the coldest, meanest things that popped into my head. Who had taken care who had taken care of my brother? Have you been playing board games with him every night instead of studying for school? Have you been kneeling with him in front of the toilet every time he throws up? Have you been sleeping at the hospital with him? Have you? I stopped for a moment and looked up for my father, truthfully. I was kind of surprised he hadn't smacked me yet. What I saw wasn't quite what I would have expected. He had sat down heavily on the basement steps. His head was bowed. He looked like a dog does right after you whack it with a newspaper. Dad? Dad? His voice was a hollow whisper that I have heard before and I hope I never hear again. You're right, Stephen. You're 100% right. I have not been taking care of you. I haven't been taking care of anybody. I haven't been, I haven't since your brother's, since October. That was the longest string of words he had uttered in months, but it suddenly dried up as if he couldn't find any more to say. And, and then he looked at me with tenderness that was also totally new to me, stood up and held his arms open. I knew this sounds weird, right in the middle of a fight and all, but I ran right into my dad's chest. After he held me for a while, I tried to speak. Dad, I don't want Jeffrey to. Then I cried until it was time for embarrassment. Burritos? And a long call from dad to mom. When my father hung up, he looked much more like my old dad, my pre-October dad. He was still kind of talked out, but there was one more thing on his accountant brain. So about that math grade. The next day, mom and Jeffrey came home. When they walked in, they encountered a scene that must have been fairly surprising. My dad and I were playing chess at the kitchen table. There was a pile of math stuff on one of the extra chairs. Dad had spent a couple of hours that morning getting me 2 chapters ahead in algebra. After I had explained the whole Renee Albert tutorial fiasco. He had felt sorry for his pathetic eldest boy. You sometimes forget how good your parents are at things. I mean, my dad did math for a living, 365 days a year. So it made sense that he knew the stuff. But I mean, he really knew the stuff. When we were done, we celebrated with my first cup of coffee ever and a chess game. Weird. My parents would never have let me have coffee before Jeffrey got sick. If there's one thing I figured out about having family crisis like ours, it's old rules no longer applied. For example, I had probably gone 4 months without eating a single vegetable, but there were times when I wished the old rules did apply, like maybe take a vitamin every day so you don't get scurvy. I got all hyped up on caffeine and won the game in about 9 minutes. So my father got a chance to be impressed by me too. And then when my mom and Jeffrey sat down at the table, it was like some kind of normal family moment or something until my mom remembered she was mad at me. She asked my dad to take Jeffrey into the living room for some father son bonding. Old dad was having quite the paternal morning. And then began racing into me. But before she could build up a good head of steam, I cut her off and explained how hard I had worked on my grades, how disappointed I was in myself, how I had turned away the world's most desirable math tutor, Renee Albert, for the sake of Jeffrey's health, and how Dad and I had already had it out about the not calling mom's cell phone incident. What could she really say? Stephen, I love you, but never ever do this again. There, I could live with that. The rest of the weekend was pretty tranquil for a change. Jeffrey was on the new anti-nausea medication. The doctors had lowered his steroid dose, so he was feeling well enough to play more actively. Also, thanks to my little math mini drama, both parents were actually looking right at me and even asking me questions about my life. Probably the coolest part was my drum lesson with Mr. Stoll on Saturday afternoon. My mom drove me instead of sleeping, which was her usual post hospital routine, and watched the whole lesson instead of going shopping or something. Afterwards, she told me she had no idea how good I had gotten. It felt pretty nice to know that my last 4 months of practicing being practice pad maniac had made a noticeable difference. As things turned out, it was a good thing mom had watched that particular drum lesson because it would be the last one we were able to afford for a long while.